If you're known as the nice leader, the one who keeps the peace, the leader who sidesteps conflict because you believe it protects connection, there's a strong chance that your team doesn't fully trust you. Not because you lack care, not because you lack competence, but because people-pleasing quietly erodes the clarity that trust requires. Here's the part most leaders miss. The very behavior you believe is building connection may actually be undermining it. You don't have to become harsh, nor do you have to swing to the opposite extreme. You have to practice something called anchored leadership. Stay with me, because here's what we're walking through today. While people-pleasing develops in leaders, especially high-performing ones, what it costs you, your team, and your organization. The psychology behind approval seeking and conflict avoidance. How this connects to control, resentment, and burnout. And how to shift using my framework for connected leadership. So let's start at the beginning, because understanding why you became a people-pleasing leader is the first step to breaking the pattern. Most people-pleasing leaders didn't become that way by accident. They were rewarded early for being agreeable. Think about it. The team member who always said yes to extra projects and got promoted for it. But now as a leader, that same pattern means they can't say no to unrealistic demands on their team. They learned early that questioning decisions slowed things down, so they nodded along. And that got them labeled low maintenance and easy to work with. And it became their ticket up, being praised for easy to work with. The annual review always says great team player and collaborative spirit, which is really code for doesn't make waves. They were the one who got promoted because they got along with everyone, which really meant they didn't challenge the status quo. Reinforced for smoothing the tension instead of naming it. When two team members clashed, they were the one who stepped in to keep the peace. Not by addressing the real issue, but by making everyone feel comfortable enough to move on. They became the person people called when things got tense, not because they solved problems, but because they made them disappear, at least temporarily. Here's what this creates. In many organizations, we say we value honesty, but we reward compliance. From a psychological standpoint, people-pleasing is often a learned safety strategy, a way to preserve belonging, and a response to environments where approval felt necessary for survival. This isn't just anecdotal. Research in organizational psychology consistently shows that leaders who rely on approval-seeking behaviors are more likely to avoid conflict, even when they know action is required. A study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that leaders with high need for approval tendencies demonstrated lower willingness to deliver critical feedback, delayed decision-making on performance issues, increased anxiety around team conflict. The problem? So here's where it gets tricky. Leadership requires clarity, not consensus. And often clarity requires discomfort before it creates trust. Discomfort is often felt first by leaders. And trust me, I know, because I used to dread the thought of making other people uncomfortable until Brene Brown's Dare to Lead training helped me see that being clear is kind. I realized that prioritizing being liked over being clear inadvertently creates ambiguity around expectations. It delays necessary conversations, and it models avoidance rather than courage. Now that we understand where people-pleasing comes from, let's talk about what it's actually costing you, because the price is higher than most leaders realize. So what does people-pleasing actually cost you as a leader? Trust erosion. Your team feels it when expectations are unclear, decisions are delayed, and feedback is softened to the point of uselessness. People don't trust leaders who are unpredictable, and people-pleasing creates emotional unpredictability. One day you're warm and accommodating, and the next you're withdrawn and passive-aggressive because you gave more than you should have. A Harvard Business Review study on leadership trust found that consistency and clarity were rated as more important to trust than warmth, specifically clarity and expectations. There was an 89% correlation with trust. Consistency and decision-making, 87% correlation with trust. Warmth and likability, well, that was only 62% correlation. Let that sink in for a moment. Second, it gets worse when leaders experience decision fatigue. This leads to outsourcing their authority to others' reactions. Every decision feels heavier. Confidence erodes and burnout increases. Studies on decision-making show that leaders who over-index on relational approval experience higher cognitive load and lower long-term effectiveness. Research from Stanford's Center on Leadership found that leaders who prioritize approval over alignment experience a 34% higher stress level, 28% lower decision-making confidence, and significantly higher rates of burnout. Thirdly, here's the part nobody talks about. People-pleasing always leads to resentment. You give more than you should. You say yes when you mean no. And eventually frustration leaks out sideways, not through honesty, but through withdrawal, micromanagement, or emotional distance. Picture this. You're leading a project team. One team member consistently misses deadlines, but you don't address it directly because you don't want to damage the relationship. Instead, you work late to compensate. You subtly redistribute their work. You grow increasingly frustrated. And then, in a completely unrelated meeting, you snap at someone over something minor. Your response is totally out of proportion to the event, and that's resentment leaking. Your team didn't see the conversation that you avoided. They only saw the emotional spillover. And now they trust you less because your behavior feels unpredictable. Here's the deeper layer. People-pleasing is not stemming from kindness. It's rooted in control. Specifically trying to control how others perceive you, which is not even possible. When approval becomes the metric, leaders abandon recognizing value, which is the first pillar of my framework for connected leadership. Recognizing value means your worth is intrinsic. Your leadership is not up for negotiation. And feedback informs you. It does not define you. When leaders don't recognize their value internally, they try to secure it externally. And that's where leadership gets fractured. The self-determination theory identifies 3 psychological needs: autonomy, the need to feel in control of your choices; competence, the need to feel effective; and relatedness, the need to feel connected. When leaders conflate relatedness with approval, they compromise autonomy. This means when they conflate connection with validation, they compromise their own leadership clarity. I remember a moment early in my leadership where I was terrified of disappointing my team. We were implementing a major organizational change, one that I knew was necessary, but I softened the message so much that no one understood what was actually required. The result was confusion, frustration, and resentment from both sides. My team felt blindsided when consequences finally arrived, and I felt exhausted from trying to manage everyone's emotions instead of leading with clarity. The moment things began to change was when I understood I wasn't protecting connection. I was protecting my need to be seen as nice. And that need was controlling me and how I was showing up. Let me be very clear. Avoiding conflict doesn't preserve relationships. It delays rupture. Research published in Harvard Business Review shows that teams led by conflict-avoidant leaders experience lower psychological safety over time, increased passive resistance, and reduced innovation. Why? Because people sense when the truth is being withheld. Connected leadership teaches us connection requires honesty, not harmony. And this is where control re-enters the conversation. Trying to keep everyone comfortable is a form of control. And control always collapses under pressure. Imagine you're leading a team meeting. 2 team members have been in ongoing tension. Everyone can feel it, but no one has named it. The people-pleasing leader says nothing, hoping that it will resolve itself. The meeting stays pleasant, but the tension grows. The connected leader pauses and says, "I'm noticing some tension here. Let's talk about it. What's going on?" It's uncomfortable, but it's clear. The clarity builds trust, even when it's uncomfortable. Here's the reframe. When leaders recognize value and know their worth, they no longer need to be liked. They lead to be clear, consistent, and grounded. This allows for direct communication without cruelty, boundaries without defensiveness, accountability without aggression. And this shifts how we see control. Instead of controlling outcomes, emotions, or perceptions, you focus on the only control that really matters: how you receive, perceive, and respond. And that's leadership maturity. And let's say a team member reacts defensively to your feedback. A people-pleasing response would be to backtrack immediately, to soften the message to avoid discomfort, and to leave the conversation unclear. A connected leadership response would be to receive. Notice their defensiveness without reacting. Perceive. Ask yourself, what am I making this mean? Am I afraid they won't like me? And respond. Stay anchored in your value and the clarity that your team needs. You might say, I noticed this landed hard. That was not my intent, but the feedback stands. Let's talk through what you're hearing. You honor both truth and connection. Let's make this usable. Notice the trigger. Ask, what am I afraid of? If I'm honest here, write it down. Often the fear is that they'll think I'm harsh. They won't like me. I'll damage the relationship. Now ask, is that fear based on evidence or is it based on my need for approval? Second, examine the story. Ask, what meaning am I assigning to their reaction? If someone disagrees with you, does that mean that you're a bad leader, that you're wrong, or you failed? Or does it simply mean that they've had a different perspective? Third, choose alignment over approval. Ask, what response reflects my values, even if it creates discomfort? This is where recognizing value meets conquering control. You can't control their reaction, but you can control whether you lead from your worth or from their approval. Some of you may remember the avocado analogy. I've shared it multiple times. And what I say is that an avocado's nutritional value does not change based on whether someone likes avocados. And I have to tell you, your value as a leader doesn't change based on whether someone agrees with your decision. Your worth is intrinsic. Let me leave you with this. People-pleasing doesn't make you a safe leader. It makes you a less trusted one. Leadership isn't about managing reactions. It's about leading yourself first. So I'll ask you, where are you choosing comfort over clarity? What truth are you avoiding to stay liked? And what might shift if you trusted your value without needing permission? If this resonated, I invite you to explore deeper. Work on this inside my virtual mind, where you have real-time access to support as you unpack leadership patterns with structure, psychology, and grace. And if this conversation matters to you, please subscribe. This is the work that we do here. The world doesn't need more nice leaders. It needs more connected ones.